I am back in the garage and I've got not one, but 2 Jeep projects going on. And people are probably wondering, why on earth are you messing around with some old Jeep TJs? Well, me personally, I've always been partial to Jeep TJs. Back when me and Lydia first got together, she had a Jeep TJ that one of her brothers had sold her that was fixed up from salvage. And we did a ton of work to it over the years, and we kept that thing, and it was our daily driver to eventually it became our weekend off-roader. So I've always been partial to them. And that was also another thing is when we were younger 20 years ago and we didn't have much money, we used to fix up vehicles to drive around with because we couldn't afford new ones. I've always enjoyed doing this sort of thing. We got this 98 Jeep TJ with a 2.5 liter. We found it on like a Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, one of the two. And it had a blown motor. It had a good body, had good everything else. It just had a blown motor. So we're like, that'd be a fun project. Let's get it. We got it for dirt cheap. We went and picked it up with the blown motor. I found a new motor for it, a new used motor that I like to take these motors apart when you have them out and go through them just to make sure like the head gasket's not plugged, because that's happened to me before with junkyard motors where somebody kept filling it up with water instead of antifreeze, and then it rusts inside there and can rust the little holes in the head gasket pretty much closed. So I like to just take them apart and do a super basic overhaul on them. So I like to take them out, take them apart, clean everything up really good, put new bearings in there, clean off the pistons, put new piston ring, just the most basic overhaul kit, and put it all back together. Kind of gives you a little bit of a peace of mind. I mean, it's not like a high-end rebuild, but I got that motor for 200 bucks, bought an overhaul kit for 150 bucks, and just went through it, freshened it all up before I was going to go to all the work to put it in there. Now, of course, like all Jeeps with 200,000 miles, you're going to come across other problems. I came across a radiator that was completely rusted out. We replaced like power steering pumps and different things like that, and also the steering dampener. All these things that were just bad over time, and we end up replacing. Then I get it all back together, start it up, and I've got a leak coming from the end of the back of the motor. And just thinking like, what is it? What did I mess up? Anyway, I find that the rear main seal that we put in must have got cut somehow. Must have messed it up. Had to pull the transmission, transfer case, all that stuff out, because that is easier than pulling the motor back out. All right, so I've got a new rear main seal for the Jeep that we're gonna put in. So here's the rear main seal. And you can see these Mopar ones actually come with a little bit of grease inside there. This one's a little bit trickier because it's like the perfect size of the crank just to slide on right there. So I'm gonna try and see if we can get it in there. Hopefully it slides on, no problem. All right, so here's the rear main seal from the back. So what I gotta do is slide it on right here. Here's the crankshaft, here's the block, and it has to fit on there just perfect. And you can see it. I pull all that out, replace the rear main seal. So I get the rear main seal back in, put it all back together, and then we go to start it up, back it back out of the garage, and then that's where the brake pedal goes to the floor. So it's like one thing after another. And this has been over the course of 2 years. Anybody who's been following this channel for a little bit, seen this thing in the background, even when I was building my rear steer rock crawler. So we're going through this one thing after another. And then we also had to replace the shocks too. You could grab it, shake it, the shocks. All right, another issue on this old Jeep. Look at that. I'm just barely moving it. Literally has no shocks left. Hard to see, but up here, I can just move it. There's nothing left, so we're replacing these with some Jeep JK shocks that we had laying around. So we're just trying to use up some of these old parts we got laying around. All right, what you got there, Liz?
Front shock.
The front shock, how bad's that one?
20,
They're not
20 or 25 years old.
They're not as bad as the back ones, are they? Those ones actually have a little resistance. Unlike these, look at, doesn't hurt to start off with some new shocks. Oh, look at that manicure. Anyway, we get all that done, replace some U-joints that we find that are bad along the way, all that sort of stuff. We painted the inside, cleaned it all up, just went through, and we put some old Jeep JK tires that we had laying around, put some wheel spacers so those would fit. Just went through this thing to try to clean it up. Now I'm at the point where I gotta fix that brake issue. Unfortunately, these Dana 35s, you've got the brakes here. Let's turn on some light, maybe that'll help. You've got the brake pad here. Well, there is no brake pad left. This was metal to metal, and I believe when this pushed out, it overextended so far it just blew out the seals on these, or they were dry rotted out. What I'm gonna do, take all this off, pull the axle shaft, take this entire assembly off on both sides. Now, we've got the other Jeep here. Now, we made a video recently on bringing this thing home. Why do we have yet a second Jeep TJ? Well, that's a good question. The good thing is, this Jeep TJ has the brake assembly with decent brake pads, not new, but decent. And it also broke the parking brake line. It has a parking brake line that I can steal off of this one. Because pretty much everything on this one, it's going bye-bye. This one has a Jeep 4.0. That's a rock solid engine. They've been around forever. Which the 2.5 and 4.0, if you put them by each other, they're like almost identical, except one has 2 more cylinders. They basically use the same size piston, same size piston rings, all that sort of stuff. It's just like if you just cut 2 cylinders off. Very similar to the Vortec 4.3 and the Vortec 5.7. You know, you've just got a couple more cylinders added to the end. But they're same pistons and everything, and same other components. So a lot of similarities between the 2.5 and the 4.0. But what we're gonna do with this one, rather than have this as a run around town daily driver, we've always wanted to try to race a little bit of Ultra 4. And we had done that recently with our Can-Am X3. We put Emily in the youth class and got out there, got to try that a little bit. And we recently got an updated side-by-side too. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna tear this thing down, strip it, except for the motor and the chassis and all of that. And I've got these set of axles I've been sitting on for a while looking for a new home. And those axles are going to go in there, along with a new roll cage and all that other sort of stuff. And what we want to make is a stock class Jeep TJ that we can race out at King of the Hammers in the 4600 class. So the 4600 class is a class that's limited to tire size. You can't run over 35-inch tires. You have to run a stock motor that came with it. You can run anything you want as far as suspension and axles. Well, almost. You can run beefed up axles. But I couldn't put coilovers on this. I still have to use stock coils. And I can only use a single shock. And the shock is limited on size and mounting location. So there are some stipulations. I will also have to put updated fuel cell in there, a bladder type fuel cell, so that it's safer. But other than that, the good thing is right over there in that corner, I have another Jeep 4.0. I have an automatic transmission. I have a Dana 300. And what I'm going to do is put all that in there. And I think the Dana 300 will hold up. Obviously, an Atlas would be the best choice. But I think I can make that Dana 300 hold up when you're only talking about 35-inch tires. You're not talking about running that big of tires. And I actually ran a stock Jeep transfer case in a rock crawler I had like 10 years ago. Up to 42-inch tires. And I didn't start breaking that transfer case until I started putting sticky tires on it. Then I started breaking the transfer case. So I think the Dana 300 could hold up to stock horsepower. The biggest thing is, you know, the higher speed and all that. But I mean, this thing with the stock suspension and stuff, I'm not really going to be jumping it and stuff. The goal is just to see how far we could get in the stock class. I think it'd be super fun. It's a class that we could afford to get into because none of the other classes we could really afford to. I mean, if I ever wanted to make this into a 4800 car, it would cost a small fortune, and this is just a really good trail car. But I do think we could make something to go out there and run with this. Also, if we build it this way, we could compete in Sportsman C and We Rock, which has almost the exact same rules. So it's something we could use in 2 different competitive areas. So that's our plan for this one. We're going to strip this thing down, turn it into a competitive vehicle. This is our little daily driver parts running vehicle in the summer. That's why I want to get these brakes fixed and get this thing back on the road. All right, just like any project that starts off with just doing brakes always balloons into something way bigger, way more complicated than you want. Simplest form, I'm just going to take the brakes, put it on there. To take the entire brake assemblies off, I have to pull the axle shafts without trying to take apart all that old rusty brake stuff, the springs and everything else. Thought it would just be easier to pull that off. Once I get in there, I find the spider gears are all messed up. These are all chewed up. Those are chewed up. All the spider gears. So common sense, once again, let's just steal the carrier from this one. The problem is, it's a limited slip carrier. Here we go. And that's all broken too. How nice. This is all broken apart. Then we got the carrier here. And that carrier, 411 gears on it. It's a deeper gearing than like the 373s or whatever are on this thing. Once again, I'm like, well, I've already got the back taken apart. I should just put those 411 gears into this one since I'm going to get rid of those axles. But then once again, that turns into way more than a brake job than I was originally anticipating doing, because then now I got to take the entire front axles apart. So I got to put the gears from that one, get them set up, put into this one, then at least get the back tires and stuff put on this one, then take the front end apart on this one and that one, steal the gears out of that one, put the gears into this one. And I'm going to double check though before I take it all apart that one has 411 gears in it. You never know, if somebody did something else. Nothing would surprise me, but I'm also trying to figure out what do I do now about the spider gears. Do I even try to order spider gears? Or do I just look at a Detroit locker for a Dana 35? I mean, do I even mess with those or just go straight Detroit locker? Which sucks because a few years ago I sold the Detroit locker for a Dana 35 that I was never going to use again. And it's one of those times where if I just would have held on to something, maybe someday I could have put used to it. And I even had chromoly shafts at one point for a Dana 35. So I mean, I don't need all that stuff. I'm not really planning on wheeling that hard. But it's like if you're in there, if you're already in there, you might as well try to upgrade it. I was almost thinking, would it be easier just take that axle out and put that entire axle in? But I also know that's never as easy as it said because all the bolts are super rusted. Every single thing is way more rusted than you think. Everything's always harder to get off than you think it's going to be. So I think a simple gear job actually would be easier. So we'll try to figure this out.